Calimero, good morning. Whoopsie, there we are. You saw a bit of my fat. It's the 10th of March today, and if I don't start with my stories for the book, the next thing we'll know it'll be 2023, Prata thought. So I'm going to start with my granny on my mother's side, and I'll go with my grandfather on my mother's side because I know much more about all these stories. You have to excuse the videos. They're a bit what's the word? Not very professional, because I thought I'd rather speak than worry about exactly how professional the video is right now. So like I told you, I came from Greece when I was 7 years old. After I finished with both the families, I will tell you about my life until 7 years old. I have lots and lots and lots of stories, not only in Greece, but also here. And a lot of the stories will be funny. However, now we're going to a serious subject, and that is with my granny's family. First of all, I need to tell you that I am actually not a Greek, as I was born in Athens, but my parents' and my dad's parents were not originally from Greece. My granny's and grandfather on my mother's side came from a place called Asia Minor. That was ancient Greece. Okay? And they came, they came from a place which is now in Turkey, because the Turks committed a lot of genocide in 1922. It's a very big story. First of Armenians, where it was so bad, the genocide of the Armenians, that my granny says she was next to the river with her sister, and they got frightened and ran up to the house because the river was turning red from the blood of the Armenians. That in the old map, it is now called Izmir in Turkey, and my grandfather came from Ayvalık, also in Turkey. However, in those years, in the proper years, it was called in Greek Smyrna, and Ayvalık. Ayvalık was exactly on the place where Troy was in ancient times. And of course you know the story about the Greeks and Troy and Helen of Troy and Alexander the Great. This will have to take another book for me to sit and explain everything. But basically, you know that where they were both born. So they both came from very high-class families. My grandfather's parents, their names was Constantine, and Xarikleia, and they were very wealthy landowners. That they lived on the coast. Ayvalık was on a coast, And it was, like I said, part of ancient Troy, which was attacked. And remember the Trojan Horse, when they say beware of Greeks bearing gifts? That's where my grandparents were from Troy. So, but just so that you know, this place was actually the real Greece. The place where many of the philosophers came from. Many wise men, many of the saints that we still believe in the Greek Orthodox Church. They all came from the part of Greece that is now considered Turkey, especially since 1922, when the Turks committed their atrocities. Before I carry on, by the way, Turkey to this day does not want to leave Greece alone. The last attack and taking over Greek land was in Cyprus in 1974. And they insist now on having a lot of the islands of Greece being taken by them, because they claim that part of the sea is Turkey. Meanwhile, that whole area was ancient Greeks. So you can't very well just decide by yourself. They were no Turks. They were Turks at that stage, but the Turks come from far inside of what we now call Russia. It's a mixture of Mongols and people from Turkmenistan. So they came and took the Greeks in 1922. Anyway, so my grandfather comes from a very wealthy landowner's family. However, oh wait, let me just tell you. I can't remember all the names of his brothers because we did not have a lot of contact with them, because only a couple of them, I don't know if there were 2 or 3, survived this. I think there were 3 that survived, or 2. No, there were 3 or 4. Anyway, so he had a sister called Irene, whereby we got the name. My uncle, their son, my uncle, my mother's brother, named his daughter Irene from my grandfather's sister. And then it was my grandfather, whose name was George. And then there was one called Thanasi. And there was one called Panayoti, and one called Dimitri. So now, my grandfather was telling us, and that's what happened with the story on his side of the family. So the Turks decided to go into that part of Greece via the coast on the one side, which is on the western, no, not the west, southeast. Okay, on the western side, I could still be wrong, okay. On the western side, which was Ayvalik, and then they would also come through all those Afghanistan was more down. All those like weird countries that are now Russia. Kurdistan and all those weird names. Kazakhstan. Anyway, so my grandfather's family were the first to be decimated. So the Turks, my grandfather had Bosnians as their servants and the workers of their lands, and Muslims, obviously, because we're Christian Orthodox. And the Turks, when they came in, just killed every Greek inside. So just before the Turks arrived at my grandfather's town, his father told the brothers, Go now quickly, go inside towards Izmirni. See if you can save yourselves. Unfortunately, they waited a bit too long, the young boys, and they were there when their father was killed, their mother was killed, and their beautiful sister Irene, who they raped by multiple soldiers, Turkish soldiers, and so she jumped into the biggest well on one side of the farm and killed herself. The boys, inclusive my grandfather, were hiding, and then they started going towards Smyrna. In Smyrna and at their summer residence right near the sea called Vurla lived my granny and her family. And they consist of, it was my grandfather, my grandmother. No, hold on. No. The family was with my granny and grandpa and her mother and her father, and they were 2 sisters. My grandparents' family was very wealthy on both sides. But like I said, first my grandfather's family was attacked. So my great-grandfather, my granny's father, he took my grandfather to help him run one of his farms because all the Greeks were trying to help all the Greeks. My granny's father, his name was Evangelus, which comes from the name of the day of the Annunciation to the Virgin Mary, that she's having a child from God called Jesus. Now, this uncle of mine, I don't think you can see him now, he's got the same name. He's the son of my granny, whose name was Paraskevi, whose name I have, and her mother's name wait, I'm a bit confused now, okay. My granny's father's mother was named Athanasia. And my grandfather was an only... Okay, this is getting confusing for this old lady. So let me go and call them as my granny's father was an only child, very wealthy child, whereby there were special servants when he rode with the horse or the carriage towards their house, because it was full of marble. There, in those years, they used marble for the carriageways, etc. They had special Bosnians which cleaned under the horseshoes. And they were farming with raisins, means grapes, and all that comes from a grape. So they sent their stuff, and olives, etc., with olive oil in that, because that's the part that you can grow. It's south and it's near the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, yeah, and the Black Sea and the... Okay, don't put Black Sea Arabi now in there. Okay, so let's just stick to Mediterranean and Aegean Sea. When they used to send their exports to Russia, a whole carriage with gold, lira, gold coins, came from Russia back to my great-grandfather's place. So there came the time for my great-grandfather, very young, to look for a wife, and he found his wife, whose name was Maria, and my mother is named out of her, from her, and she came from a family of one girl, and then there was brothers. So the brothers were Tasho. Why do I remember? I'm trying to think of my other uncles. Oh dear. I'll be telling you that she had a few brothers, okay? Can't remember their names right now, because you know I'm having a problem with my brain. So they fell in love and got married, my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother on my mother's side. And they had two daughters, which the one was Paraskevi, like me, and the other one was Eli, like Eleni, which my little sister was named after. Unfortunately, when the boys, my grandfather and his brothers, came towards their houses, apparently they were quite far, and so the Greeks in Izmir didn't think that the Turks will manage to come up to Izmir. But then the Greeks didn't know that there were other Turks coming from Russia towards them. And this must have been 1922, even though it was the Romanovs. These other Turks came from those little weird republics in Russia. So they were not actually from Russia. They weren't white Russians, as we call them. So these boys helped on the farm, and there was already skirmishes in the town among Greeks and Turks that were working as servants, and Bosnians, and my granny's, great-granny's sons ended up in a fight with Turks, and Bosnians, and they killed one Turkish guy. I don't think they killed him. I think it was an accident during like a bar fight. Okay, they were all youngsters, very young. So if the Turks had gotten hold of him, of the brothers, they would have been dead. So my great-granny went to the Sultan's palace and waited to see the Sultan's wife, which in Greece is called Sultana or a Sultana. And she fell on her knees and said, "This and this happened. My children did not do it on purpose." She was crying, she was upset, she didn't want her sons to die. So the Sultan's wife said to her, "I'm giving you 2 days. I will stop my husband for 2 days to start looking for them. Get them on a boat and out of Izmir." So my great-granny's family got on a boat and landed up in Alexandria, well, in Egypt. My granny and grandpa carried on with their farms and their wealthy upbringing, even after my uncles had to run away, my granny's brothers. And unfortunately, the Turks were coming nearer Izmir. The Greeks, from what we call the so-called, we used to call them horrible, oily people, basically, Paleolithites, sent some ships to apparently save the Greeks, pick them up before the Turks took over their towns. No one told my granny's family. No one. The one Bosnian Turkish woman, and another Bosnian man who worked on the farms, came and said to my great-great-father Evangelist, "They are coming. Get your wife and your daughters away and yourself." My grandfather, who must have been about 40 by that time, maybe even younger, they got married young in those years, said, "I'm staying to fight, but we must hide my mother and, his mother, my Granny Maria, and their daughters, my Granny Pari and my Granny Helen." So they put them in very large baskets and they put them on a wagon, which they used.